Welcome back to the show, everybody. Check out these headlines here. Judge rules in favor of Binance. The SEC is losing on a lot of fronts. We've got the digital asset hearing from yesterday, congressional hearing with all the highlights, and boy, do we got them. And we got this. Somebody roll that beautiful intro.
Digital Perspectives with Brad Kimes. Come on in.
Welcome back to the show, everybody. You can follow us on Twitter and YouTube for exclusive content. Right now, the cryptocurrency market cap is $1.1 trillion. The market is off by 0.3%. Good morning, everyone. 25,900 plus for Bitcoin, 1747 and change for Ethereum. The Tether market cap is 83.5 billion. Watching it close. Right now, XRP off by 8.6% in the last 24 hours. 50 cents is where we're sitting at right now, ladies and gentlemen. But let's take a look at this. This is linked to, and I tell you, we talk about all the amazing products and private equity that you can get on this platform. And yes, you have to be accredited, but you know what? Don't forget about Representative Mike Flood, who just introduced the Equal Opportunity for All Investors Act, which would really make it so if you want to be an accredited investor, you could take a test and then you could be accredited. And I want you to think about the growth potential there when it comes to Link2 itself. Now, Link2 is fully subscribed right now, but a little birdie's told me that today at 8 a.m. Pacific time, you will have the opportunity to get that Link2 private equity. Click the link underneath, link2.com. Check it out. Let's get started right here, ladies and gentlemen. ETHgate is real, and all the XRP holders should be thankful for Digital Perspectives, digital asset investor, and John Deaton have been tirelessly fighting to expose the harm done to us and by our own government. And I know she always means the entire community as well, so shout out to Molly Elmore for sharing that. But there is a really great article with CoinDesk, and it's not because I'm in it, but it's because the fight of the XRP army is recognized, and the story is told so well. I want to tell you, I had the pleasure to sit down with Jeff Wilser, who wrote this article for CoinDesk a few weeks ago, and I wasn't sure how it would come out. But I tell you, it really is indicative, and there's so many other incredible people in this article that are featured as well. You need to read this article, and shout out to all of the unsung heroes out here in the community, because it was a decentralized justice and Twitter sleuths and social media platform sleuths that all came together to really bring this attention to this fight. And we couldn't be happier that CoinDesk has recognized this. And I tell you, I want to shout out to the person who wrote this article that really, I think, shows the community outside of XRP and the XRP community, but the crypto community, exactly what we've been fighting for. So shout out to everyone who has put up that fight. Right here, this is Cowboy.Crypto, who shows, based on the above analysis here, this is document 831-79, and subject to qualifications and assumptions set forth herein, we believe as the date of the memorandum that you have reasonable grounds to conclude that XRP does not satisfy all elements of the Howey analysis and therefore is not a security for purposes of federal securities law. How about that? And yet we fight. That's what the story's all about, ladies and gentlemen, right? Breaking news right here. You know, the SEC doesn't stop, but I'll tell you what, judges are waking up, ladies and gentlemen. Judges rule in favor of Binance. No asset freeze imposed in the SEC case. Listen to this. Meta Lawman breaks this down, and shout out to him. He does it about as good as anybody ever could. The Binance defendants have filed their opposition to the SEC's motion for an asset freeze order. And I love reading all of this because the SEC gets body slammed here in a second. They have proposed a reasonable compromise order that would, 1, secure the assets of all Binance U.S. customers. That's great. Place the private keys in the hands of U.S. personnel. Okay. Provide for accounting of Binance U.S. assets. And not surprisingly, the SEC has refused to agree to the order. By offering reasonable compromise, the Binance defendants have now taken the high ground. Hearing starts, it was yesterday at 2. Well, this is what came out of that. Breaking SEC versus Binance hearing. Judge does not enter SEC's request asset to freeze the order. Judge encourages the parties to come and agreed compromise order and report back on Thursday. Oh, the judge apparently caught on that there was no actual emergency. I'm told the judge pressed the SEC on whether they had an actual evidence of the Binance U.S. customer assets being moved overseas. They had none. Oh, it gets even better. It sounds like the hearing in the SEC versus Binance went even worse for the SEC than he had heard. According to CoinDesk, the judge hammered the SEC attorneys about their intransigence on the freeze order. It says here, the judge was also frustrated by the SEC's inability to answer the simple question of whether the U.S. customers' assets had been transferred overseas. The judge said, "It's stunning that I've asked each of you SEC attorneys this." Oh my goodness. The CoinDesk article is the most thorough report I've seen on the hearing. There you go right there. Now, take a look at this. Laura Shin says she's going to be interviewing SEC Commissioner Hester Peirce, a.k.a. Crypto Mom, tomorrow, which is going to be today. Well, Meta Lawman says, won't you ask her if she voted to authorize the lawsuits against Coinbase and Binance? And if she believes Gary Gensler should have recused himself from the involvement in the decision to sue Binance, given his discussions with CZ about serving as an advisor in the launch of BNB. Oh, so this is why we love Meta Lawman right here, right? That's a great question right there. Yeah. Then we have this, the one and only John Deaton. I truly believe good judges will continue to see the bad faith coming from the SEC. Now, this is being said here based on what's happening with Paul Grewal and the Coinbase issues now. A few minutes ago, the SEC filed its response to last week's Third Circuit Court, and you can read it for yourself below and see all the highlights of that. However, John Deaton goes forward and says Judge Netburn in the Ripple case stated that the SEC lacks faithful allegiance to the law. The judge in the Voyer case took the SEC to task. The judges in the Grayscale appeal openly questioned SEC's inconsistency. And then we see Binance case that the SEC attorneys are now being body slammed over what they're looking to do, and it's not happening. The SEC is losing on a lot of fronts, ladies and gentlemen. John Deaton says here, hopefully the judge here orders them to respond within 30 days, and we will see. Meta Lawman agrees, no doubt about it, and hopefully we get that decision in the SEC versus Ripple case from Judge Torres. Meanwhile, we also had the Financial Services Committee hearing and everything that went on yesterday. The major takeaways from today's hearing were stablecoin legislation seems more bipartisan and feasible than a few months ago. That's good. And the FSC Dems are starting to align more with their Democrat colleagues. And it says the House Ag Dems on need of a market structure bill. And it says not all, but many. So there's progress, but it's slow, right? Well, let me tell you something. This guy right here is Representative Mike Flood. And what you're about to witness here is a trap and a snare being set. Well, he walks Aaron Kaplan right into it, and it is amazing how he walks him into this. You're going to need to see every bit of this because it's worth it. I want to remind people that U.S. Representative Mike Flood is also the gentleman that introduced the Equal Opportunities for All Investors Act that we just spoke about for accredited investors and non-accredited investors to be able to take a simple test to be able to pass. I don't know how hard it would be, but it may be hard. But nevertheless, a test is better than the requirements that are in place now. And that is an amazing opportunity. Take a listen to this, because at the time he gets to the end of this, Aaron Kaplan's he has nothing. He has nothing he can say here. Take a listen.
Thank you, Mr. Nickel. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes. I'd like to start by to read a question from a comment letter that Prometheum sent in response to the SEC's December 2020 Special Purpose Broker-Dealer Framework. Quote, "The definition of a digital asset security, as used in the proposal, is a digital asset that meets the definition of a security under the federal securities laws. This definition puts a burden on the industry to determine which digital assets are securities. As a result, we believe the clarity is needed to understand the regulatory framework they must comply with, end quote. That was in a letter dated April 26 from Prometheum, specifically signed by Benjamin S. Kaplan, co-CEO of the company. I offer this into the record without objection. This concern, which Prometheum themselves raised in 2020, probably sounds familiar for those who track this committee closely. It is the exact same concern we've heard from witnesses in front of this committee before. How can a broker-dealer register if they don't know which assets are a security and which are not? Further, it makes the same argument that other firms have made, that the lack of clarity from the SEC puts an undue burden on the industry. Mr. Kaplan, in your testimony, you were very confident that no new legislation is needed in the digital asset space to clarify this question. What has changed between the date of this letter in 2021 and when your firm called for clarity, and now? What has changed?
Over the 2+ years since that time, there's been additional enforcement actions and statement by the SECs, which have clarified any questions that we had in regards to the designation of a digital asset as a security.
Mr. Kaplan, Prometheum's website says that Prometheum ATS supports, quote, many tokens that mostly trade on crypto exchanges, end quote. I'd like to dig in on that just a little bit. Can Prometheum customers trade in Ether? If your answer is yes, please explain how.
Not currently.
Can Prometheum customers trade in Bitcoin? If your answer is yes, please explain how.
No.
Just for the audience at home's benefit, Ether and Bitcoin make up more than 60% of the digital asset market. Mr. Kaplan, given that either Ether and Bitcoin make up more than 60% of the digital asset market, if the current system is working, why can't your customers trade the most popular and widely used digital assets?
Regulation and new ATSs and custodians should take a crawl, walk, run approach, and essentially they will proceed to add additional assets and abilities as time goes on. I'd like to point out when the...
I'm going to reclaim my time. Mr. Kaplan, did Prometheum receive any additional exemptive relief from the SEC that has not been publicly shared?
No.
Thank you, Mr. Kaplan. Prometheum's special purpose broker-dealer license does not address the core issue. There is not a consistent definition of a digital asset security within current law. This point was made obvious when Chair Gensler could not say definitively whether Ether is a digital asset security when asked by Chairman McHenry in this very room a couple months ago. In other words, that same question that Prometheum themselves raised in their 2021 comment letter is still unanswered. That's why legislation is needed. That's the problem that the chairman's bill works to solve. To testify in front of our committee that your company's charter, which only allows for trading in a very small subset of assets, is evidence that no legislation is needed just doesn't make sense. If anything, the fact that Prometheum's customers cannot trade some of the most popular digital assets is an illustration of the broader problem, Mr. Kaplan. I yield back.
Boy, Mike Flood's somebody I wouldn't want to have upset with me. I can tell you that. Well, damn if he can't walk him into it. Flood explicitly lays out why Prometheus claims that their XRP-The approval is evidence of a clear path to regulatory compliance are absolute nonsense. You can't say it any better. But there was another clip from yesterday we got to take a look at here. Now, you guys know I've been talking about FSOC for over a couple years now. Well, Congress is talking about it too. Take a listen.
Last week, the House Agriculture Committee heard testimony from CFTC Chair Benham and former SEC General Counsel Berkowitz, who served under Chairman Gensler. And it was striking to see how both of those witnesses call for congressional action to address the gap in federal regulation of digital assets. And this mirrored the Financial Stability Oversight Committee's report last October. And this morning, for those of you who are not glued to C-SPAN here at the House, we had Secretary Yellen here for a very interesting morning. And she also suggested that she stood by that FSOC report calling for a comprehensive regulatory framework for digital assets. And she said, and I just would quote it for this hearing, "We'd like to see your regulatory framework over those markets and their gaps in regulations." I would point out specifically stable coins. And I do believe we need a comprehensive federal prudential framework and would be pleased to work with you and the Congress to develop such a framework. So in my view, we have the CFTC thinks that this is the right direction to take because there are gaps in the system, notwithstanding the comments from Mr. Kaplan. And our Treasury Secretary seems to agree, as well.
And there you have it. And I agree too. And it sounds like to me that's exactly where it's going to come from, and Congress is going to wait for it. Take a look at this. But until we can get this right here, Ashley Prosper lays it down. Because Congress can say they're going to do whatever, and FSOC, the prudential regulator, can say they're going to write whatever they're going to write. One thing I'm pretty certain of is we're going to need that decision and that ruling from Judge Torres first. Ashley Prosper says here, this one ruling from Judge Torres has global implications. It's the most important case she's ever decided. There are hundreds of exhibits with thousands of pages. Then there's expert testimony, again, hundreds of pages, hundreds of citations to case law, which is a couple more thousand pages. Then there's the summary judgment briefings themselves, plus the amicus briefs. Yes, she's a judge and she's used to reading a lot, but I'd rather have a slow, careful, and considered decision in place of a rushed, careless, and thoughtless one. Patience is a virtue. Having said that, hurry up, Judge Torres. That's going to do it for me. Not financial advice from me or anyone else. It's just my digital perspectives. I'll catch all of you on the next one.